many school leaders that we talk to see funding as a major barrier to accomplishing anything that they want. How do you challenge that mindset in your work?
I think it really depends on how a person defines funding, because if we just look at like title funding, that is a limited resource, and it can feel like funding's a barrier sometimes because the appropriations committee will assign different dollar amounts every year, and sometimes they go up a little bit, but sometimes they come down, and that feels really limiting. But funding is so much bigger than that.
Welcome to Change Starts Here, a FranklinCovey education podcast for K-12 leaders driving meaningful change through bold thinking, real stories, and proven strategies for lasting impact. Now here's your host, Dustin Odham.
Welcome back to the Change Starts Here podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Odham, and today we're diving into a topic that every school leader wrestles with at some point: funding. Whether it's sustaining current initiatives, launching something new, or simply keeping the lights on, funding often feels like the biggest barrier to standing in the way of progress. But here's the good news. It really doesn't have to be that way. And to help us rethink about how we approach it, I'm joined by someone who lives and breathes this work. Jennifer Chevalier is our Director of Funding for FranklinCovey Education. And you actually may remember Jennifer from last year's Change Starts Here research conversations, where she sparked some powerful dialogue about systemic synergy and sustainable change. Today, she's bringing that same clarity and passion to a different but equally critical subject: the top 3 missteps leaders can make on the road to funding and how to avoid them. Jennifer's work is more than just finding money. It's about shifting mindsets, building strategic alignment, and helping districts position themselves for a long-term success. So whether you're a superintendent feeling stretched thin, a principal trying to make the numbers work, or an educator with a big idea but no budget yet, this conversation is for you. Jen, you and I have known each other for several years now. I've got a chance to work with each other closely in a number of different ways. And I'll just say this, like, since the day you've joined FranklinCovey, you have been someone who's just constantly focused on adding value to every room, to every person in every way. And so I'm excited to talk to you. I feel so thankful to be your colleague, but I also feel so thankful to be your friend. And I'm just excited for you to be able to share, your heart and your genius with the world today. So thanks for making time for us.
Wow, thanks for making me sound better than I am, and I'm sure happy to be here. Let's do this.
No, it will be apparent really quickly to the audience of why you're here. So, and obviously I know a number of the audience knows you from our Change Starts Here research series. So, anyways, but this is focused on your role as Director of Funding for FranklinCovey Education, which you've taken from, I think, a grants role to a real full strategic focus to partner with schools and districts all across the country to be able to unlock the funding opportunities to do more of this work. So I'm curious, before we dive into how and all the strategies that you have, what drives your passion for this work? And, what personal values kind of guide you to show up every day?
I'm a little bit of an idealist, but to me, public education has the potential to be the great equalizer, Dustin. I know we've lost our way in some respects in the field of education, but funding for evidence-based programs is just really critical to effective education. So I've shifted my focus to supporting districts and schools with funding for Leader in Me in particular, because of the abundance of evidence that shows the impact of teaching the 7 habits of highly effective people to students just does level the field for all students, and students of all backgrounds can thrive. And we've seen that, in the research in the United States and globally. So that's really what drives me. But you also talked about like my background and some of my perspectives coming into this. I started as a public educator, and that's when I realized that it is not a level playing ground coming in. I taught kindergarten my first year, and just seeing the disparity among the kids and their readiness to be in school and their ability to focus and the different home lives really struck me. And so, I stayed in the classroom for a lot of years, and then eventually moved up into K-12 instructional coaching, where I got a much broader picture of what's happening across the system. And then I worked in state and federal grant writing and management for a large district in Florida towards the end of my public education career. And I just saw there the impact of really solid, effective programs on student outcomes, especially in a school that's one of our case studies, Samuel S. Gaines, which is a K-8 in Fort Pierce, Florida. And they were a bottom 300 school when I started in that district, and they are now an A-rated school. So, just seeing that school improvement and change can happen is just so motivating to me. And I want that growth and success for every student.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I started there is obviously this conversation is really about practical steps to how to unlock funding, right? And to how to attack where people's paradigms are. But I think it's always important to understand who we're talking to, right? So, like, while I think you are brilliant, and I think everybody who gets to work with you would attest to that, the heart that drives you every day to show up and to show up for people is just incredible. Right now, I can think of in my other role, two conversations I've had, one with a really, really tiny school in Illinois and one with a bigger district in Minnesota, and your team's ability to like dissect, figure out where the challenge is, and to jump right in with potential clients has just been incredible. So I just want to make sure everybody knows like who this amazing woman is that's behind this camera, behind this voice, if you're listening. So let's just dive in right now so they understand
Okay.
who you are. Let's dive into I'm thinking about the top 3 missteps. So as districts start preparing for this year's funding applications, right now districts are looking at the future, right? What would you say are the top 3, I don't know, missteps you see most often when it comes to people seeking funding?
The first one that comes to mind right off the bat is waiting until you actually need the money to start figuring out how to get it, because you won't believe how many times people reach out like, hey, there's a school that needs funding, or there's a district that needs funding, and I don't have a pot of gold under this chair. Like, it's not immediate like that. Funding is more of a 6 to 12 month cycle of identifying what you need the funding for, which funding opportunities would align and best support what you're trying to achieve as a school or district leader, and then preparing a team to support the development of a winning application, and then getting the application in by the deadline. And then there's still the review process on the other side, where the funder is looking at all the applications coming in, trying to figure out, who should be awarded the funding. And so you always need to be proactive in the funding space, and don't wait until you need the money right now, because you're just not going to have it like that.
Yeah, I mean, so that's obviously the first misstep. But as you say it, like I mean, I think it's normal for folks to wait until they need it because right now
Mhm.
it feels nebulous to say, guy, I know at some point I'm going to need money. I want to apply to a grant, but I don't know what I need money for. So how do you
Mhm.
help people kind of get over that first, like, I guess that paradigm that holds me back?
Sure. Well, if you think about your school or your district's priorities, like there may be little tweaks in those, but they're generally going to be the same. So if you start like a funding calendar and really map out what, state and federal grants might align and the timeline of those, you can really do some historical checks and see like, hey, this grant might work, and it typically comes out in the month of April. So I'll be looking for it. And if you just map things out and have that historical understanding, then when you're clear on what you need money for, you have something to go to. And that groundwork is already laid for you, and you can just start moving forward. So just having that awareness and the patterns and timelines of funding can be so helpful.
Well, it sounds like, if I'm a school leader or a district leader, one good question to reach out to my funding team on is just finding out if they have a calendar, right? And maybe kind of
Mhm.
diving in with them. Are there any tools or resources that you use either in your old world at a school district or you use here that you would want school districts to be able to reach out and start helping build this proactive approach?
Actually, I did create a resource to accompany this episode. I think you'll find it in the
Of
show
course you did.
notes.
Of
Um,
course you
but
did.
and I'll talk a little bit more about this probably a little later in our process here. But there's like a step-by-step guide, and then an actual tool to help you map out some potential funding sources, how they align to what you're trying to do to get you started. Yeah.
That's the most Jen Chevalier answer. I've actually created a tool. You don't have to even think about this. So, just continuing to prove what I said earlier, you said I was overhyping you. I think I'm probably not doing you justice. So,
Uh,
first misstep, waiting until the money is needed. Let's not do that. Second misstep is what?
I think educators especially have this like, I should take this on by myself mentality. And really, the land of grants and funding, you need a team, a core team to work together. So don't try and take this on alone as a school leader or a district leader. You really need to develop an understanding of who's around you, what stakeholders are within your midst that you can pull together to have this network, because you need people with different strengths. You need somebody with financial management strengths and budgeting strengths. You need somebody with like the vision. You need somebody that is a really skilled technical writer. Somebody that's a researcher and can pull data for you for your grant applications. So if you have that team in place, that's something you can do right now, whether you need funding immediately or not, and build this team and learn how to start working together and building out that calendar together that we just talked about. That will set you up for success when the right opportunity comes along. So you really do need that cross-functional approach to successful grant writing. Don't just do it yourself or hand it off to a teacher or somebody in the district office and say, here, go do this. It will never be as rich and as fully developed as it should be. And that will limit your chance of winning.
Well, I have my own opinions of why that kind of paradigm exists, right? So why go out on my own? I'm curious, given your roles, like I said, in a district before or here, and you've talked to lots of folks who've gone through it. What do you think that key paradigm is that keeps people thinking, I'm not going to ask for help as they're searching for funding?
I think we don't want to inconvenience other people. A lot of times as educators, we see ourselves as there to help people and serve people. And I think that's the heart of nearly every educator I've ever met. And so, with that heart, we just take on things ourselves so that we're not putting it on others. But actually, I have found in my experience that that ends up robbing people of opportunities to grow. And so, not everyone's going to want to get involved in this space for sure. And they'll make it clear that they don't want to, and that's fine. But there are some people that are interested in this or are really motivated because of the outcomes that can come from it. And so we need to push beyond that fear that we're going to be burdening other people and really look at it from, hey, we need to work together to support our students and our teachers and our school and district.
Yeah. Well, all right. First two missteps. Sounds like waiting until the money is needed. So we don't want to wait for the money needed. We need to have a proactive approach. The second one, not asking for help. So we need to recognize that we need to build a team and find folks that can help us. What's the third misstep?
The third misstep I did a couple times early on in my career. So this is definitely the
Best
voice of
lessons are
experience.
learned, right? Not just taught.
So every funder has things that are really important to them. So whether it's a foundation or your state department of ed or the federal government, buckets of funding are really geared toward very specific priorities. And that's typically what they're called in a grant RFA or RFP. It'll say priorities. If what you're trying to achieve does not clearly align with the priorities that the funder has, no matter how excellent your grant application is, you're not going to win. And so I would look and be like, oh, well, that organization has tons of money, or like, they support education. It doesn't say that they support this thing that I'm trying to do, but I mean, it's still in that bucket of education. It doesn't work. So really do your homework. Make sure you're clear on priorities. And again, as you're building out that calendar, only put things on the calendar that do align. And, I've mentioned so far state and federal grants, so the public funding space, but there are billions of dollars in private philanthropy that are just begging for something that works that they can attach themselves to. So getting clear on different foundations in your area or nonprofit funding organizations around you is really important, and getting clear on what's important to them, even having conversations with them. Like, these are the types of things that are a priority for my school or my district. What I see online is that your priorities are these things. Is there a close enough alignment? And just knowing, so that you know whether to be tracking those opportunities or not, can be really helpful to you.
That's great. So let me name them again. The 3 missteps as you see them: waiting until the money is needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not asking for help, and
Mm-hmm.
then having a misalignment with funder priorities. So making sure that you get aligned with the fundings you are seeking funding for. You make sure you're clearly aligned with them.
Absolutely. You nailed it.
All right. Well, as you know, because you've been a part of me in this podcast for a while, we focus a lot on paradigms here, and so all of us are a result of our own paradigms, and we constantly need to check our own paradigms. It's one of my favorite parts of working for FranklinCovey, is being around a group of people who show grace for each other, but also are bold and challenging each other's paradigms. So in this case, um, both of us have worked in districts, and we've probably had these same paradigms before. But many school leaders that we talk to, and I know I was one at some point, see funding as a major barrier to accomplishing anything that they want. Right? How do you challenge that mindset in your work?
I think it really depends on how a person defines funding. Because if we just look at like title funding, that is a limited resource, and it can feel like funding's a barrier sometimes, because the appropriations committee will assign different dollar amounts every year, and sometimes they go up a little bit, but sometimes they come down, and that feels really limiting. But funding is so much bigger than that. And when we really look, I did a search before we got on here, Dustin, and according to the Institute of Education Sciences, in 2023, $570 billion in US K to 12 public education funding was available. So almost 450 billion of that was at the state level, and 126 billion was at the federal level. There is not a shortage of funding, and that doesn't even take into consideration the billions of dollars in the private funding space. So there really is enough funding. We just have to broaden our view of funding and the way we go about it.
I mean, that's wild to me. I think I've looked at it a little bit more simply, but that actually emboldens me more. With my principals or at our district, we were always thinking, just like a family budget, we'll find money for the things that are the most important for us to, what we're going after. But you said, a second ago, funding is not just about finding money, right? It's about strategic alignment. And so I don't know can you just explain what that really means? Like, I know we talked about it a little bit, but it's like in my head, I'm like, okay, I get this. But how do I really map out strategic alignment?
Sure. So a lot of times when I'm asked to speak about funding at conferences or in different environments, I bring 2 beach balls, actually 3. There's a third. I ask for 2 volunteers to come up, and I have one volunteer be the school or district leader that's trying to apply for funding, and I have the other volunteer be the funder. And so on both of their beach balls, it says what's important to them. So school or district leader, like, what's important to you are, your schools, your students, your staff, your own family, your own income, your ability to provide for your family, all those things. And so then I have you, the school or district person, start bouncing your beach ball. And in order to bounce a beach ball repetitively, you have to be looking at it, right? So they're over here looking at their beach ball. Sometimes it's falling down, they're picking it up and going. The funders over here looking at what's important to them. So on their beach ball, it'll say some of the priorities of their organization, whatever their mission and vision is. And so then I have them start bouncing their own beach ball. And of course, their eyes are on their own beach ball because that's what their priorities are. So the audience gets to see that the 2 people up front are looking at very different things, right? Their eyes and their focus and their attention are on 2 separate things. The goal is to take the third beach ball, which aligns the priorities of the school or district and the funder. And now we can hit the beach ball back and forth. And now both people's eyes are on the same ball. And that's what alignment does. It gets both people working together towards shared priorities and vision. And that feels good to everybody.
That is awesome. I hope people listening right now are taking notes to figure out how to incorporate that, even if it's not a funding exercise. How do I incorporate this in any of my teaching or PD with my staff? Because that is awesome. I'm laughing because like we've known each other for a long time, and I've not had exposure to that. That's brilliant. As I hear that, right? So we've got alignment. I think this is how I felt in the past. This is how I know some districts have felt. Probably many actually. Like there has to be people listening right now that are aligned with us that say grants are just too complicated. It's too cumbersome, too complicated. I don't have the talent. Even if I go through the effort to write, research, grab the team that you suggested, we're never going to get it. So I got to focus on what I can control, which is just doing the job in front of me and using the dollars that I know that we have in our budget. What do you say to that?
Let me just acknowledge that I understand that feeling. I totally do. And I will say some grant applications are too complicated and honestly are not worth the effort, especially based on the percentage of applicants that end up getting funded. So knowing a little bit about the application process and your likelihood of winning can help you avoid some of those beast applications that you're almost guaranteed not to win anyway. So that, let's just set that over here on the side for a second. But back over here, there's a lot we can do to be proactive to set ourselves up for success with more manageable grant applications. So what does being proactive look like with grants? Well, you can start building out language. There are very consistent sections of grant applications that pretty much no matter what grant you're applying for, they want to know who you are. So you can start writing about your organization and have places where you fill in the current data at the time that you're actually going to submit the application. But you can provide the background of your organization, you know, the types of schools, the types of students that you serve, all those different pieces. If you already have that ready, you already have a section of the application done when it's time. And that, I mean, just right off the bat, just plugging in a few data points and having one section done is like, okay, I can do this. You can also build a language library around other things. Like they always want to know what your needs are. What are the needs that you're trying to solve for? And then how is the project that you're writing about in the grant going to solve those needs? So being clear on the needs, having your data ready. You probably already have it ready for school improvement plans and district improvement plans. So creating a library where all those things are in one spot and easy to find, you can totally pull language from those other documents and boom, there goes your needs section. You've got that done. So there's just a lot that you can have on hand and have ready. Every time you submit a grant application, especially if it's a winning one, save the language because you may be able to repurpose it down the line. You never want to keep it exactly the same because things do change. Your data will change. You'll need to update some things. But if you have 80% of it ready to go and you just have to modify it, it makes things so much easier. And then again, this cross-functional mentality of just having a team that is thinking about this and working on this together just lightens the load for everybody and makes it doable.
Yeah, I love the idea of the 80%, like keeping the successful ones and having on call. I love the idea of, every principal and school leader and district leader has done plenty of SIP plans. And so we know we have it all. So how do we capture it in a way that we can use it for our grants? As you were talking, I kind of went to a place where, I know AI is very popular all across the globe. And so I think I was just talking to my sister-in-law who works for, a big media company, and they won this, I'd say probably $1 billion pitch recently.
Wow.
And I picked her up from the airport. So we got to have a good one-on-one time. And what I found interesting is that she said the thing that stuck out to them is that, or the person that they pitched it to, they didn't use AI. They could tell who used AI and didn't. And that was my thinking was, man, do people actually care about that in the foundation space, grant space? So I'm curious on both sides of this. What encouragement do you have when people, to utilize AI, and how would you encourage it? And then on the flip side, what kind of lookouts do you have?
This is a really great and complicated question and response. But
Sorry to throw this curveball your way, but it's the one that I was just thinking about as we're talking.
I love the challenge of it because here's the deal. There is an element to AI that's useful in grants, but it also can be detrimental. And so learning how to navigate that is super important. I have seen some grant guidelines say that if it is discovered that you have used AI, either your application will be disqualified or the funder will never consider funding you again.
Wow.
Other grant guidelines don't have any restrictions on AI. So making sure these grant guidelines, by the way, can be anywhere from 10 pages to 130 pages. So do a document search for AI, artificial intelligence, to see if there are any hard and fast rules around it.
Yep.
If there aren't, there are, I would say, responsible ways to use AI and irresponsible ways. So a lot of times with grants, there are word count limits or page limits. And a lot of times to explain all the things that they're asking you to explain, you end up over those limits. So AI is a great tool to help make your writing more concise, and help you fit within the parameters of those limits. So that's a great way to use it. Finding resources, I will ask AI a question that I need to address, but I'll ask it to give me the citations to the sources because I don't fully trust it yet. But it brings up sources for me that would have taken me hours to find, or I may never have found. And I'll go into the actual source documents and do my homework there and make sure that what I'm saying is accurate. But it really expedites the work that I have to do around research. So I think those are more responsible ways. An irresponsible way, I think, is just putting in the prompt for a section of the grant and knowing you have a 2-page limit and asking AI to write it for you. It will never, I shouldn't say never, there are no nevers. It will rarely be a winning strategy because there are just elements lost in AI. It's like a more sterile writing. And while you want to be really data based in your grant application and it's more technical writing, you do want some of that heart and some of those anecdotal pieces woven through. And if those are missing, it's just going to fall flat. As AI evolves, could it be just the right thing at some point? It could be. And I'll be curious to see if the parameters around AI change as the effectiveness of AI changes.
Yeah, this is why I don't get enough to Florida enough, but I still remember our first dinner down south. We can talk about anything because you put so much thought into it, and you're not short on opinions or analysis, and so this is a blast. With that, let's hop into some practical just
Okay.
guidance, because I know that you, as much as we can debate things, you also really couple that with like, well, what does this mean? How are we going to do it? So, what are 2 to 3 practical steps any school leader could take this week to better position themselves for funding opportunities?
So, as I mentioned earlier in the show notes, is a link to this resource. And I know you just said 2 to 3 steps, but there's actually 5 steps on the resource. So, I'll go through them a little faster. But you really want to start building that team, that like funding, cross functional funding team, identifying who would be interested in that or who has the talents needed. Building that a 3-year strategic funding roadmap with the calendar, like you're always going to need money. And wouldn't it be the best problem ever to have too much money? So even if it's not critical right now, you should always be pursuing money. You will always find plenty of great ways to spend it. So the more you have relationships with different funders, the more experience you have in the grant realm, the more likely you will win more grants. It's like success breeds success. If other people see that organizations are funding you, they're going to want to jump in and be part of that win and that collaboration for success. So those are 2 things out of the gate. And developing, local and regional partnerships with funders, just establishing relationships. Join your Chamber of Commerce if you're not a part of that already. Get to know some business leaders in your community. Get to know the nonprofits that award grant funding or donate in different ways. And, really deeply understand them. It's seek first to understand, not to be understood. If you understand them and what they're trying to achieve, that's how you learn to align what you're trying to do with them. So that's definitely a critical piece. And that takes years really to develop all these different relationships. So it's never too early to get started with that. building these like shovel ready proposal is really helpful. Having that library of language at your disposal to really expedite the process and make it feel manageable. And then asking for help. Like some districts that are larger will have a grants department, but I also know lots of districts can't afford that. But there are tons of resources on the internet. If you don't know where to find them, ask AI. It will give you the links to different sites. There are a lot of national organizations that offer templates, and there are also consultants. So, sometimes I wonder about districts that don't put any money toward hiring support for grants because it seems short-sighted to me. And an example of a district actually in Illinois, they paid a consultant $2,500 to help them win $117,000, right? I mean,
Wow.
that's a great investment.
Yeah.
And are you guaranteed to win when you hire somebody? No. And so there is a risk to it. But from my perspective, that's a fairly small risk for a whole lot of reward. And so even if they had to do it a couple times and they end up spending $7,500 to win 117,000, wouldn't that still be worth it? I mean, so yeah, those are the steps that come to mind. And then I also created a worksheet within that document that's in the show notes to help them start mapping things out and think this through.
I love that. I when I think about, in this work, so many people, it seems like there's a lot of people who just want to partner with us and want to do the leader in me and implement change lives, that they get to this last place where it's like, man, it's so hard to get the funding. And it feels like you've pointed out here are missteps. There's actually way more funding, both state and federal, than we could even imagine. And that's not even counting, the outside foundations and chambers of commerce and other areas that want to play a role. What's one piece of advice you would give to superintendents or principals today that just feel stuck right now as you kind of leave us today? What's the best advice you have?
I would say lean into your connections. You have a lot of people in your realm that know other people. So, as a school leader, somebody on your PTA or one of your staff members has a cousin who's on the board of this foundation or has a brother who runs this company. And if we just work within the people that we know and their connections, that can often solve the funding challenges that we have, because businesses are looking to build partnerships in the community and support their community and also get some recognition. So just like at a high school football field, you see those banners up because different people have sponsored the football team. People can sponsor Leader in Me at your school and give them some recognition, right? It's good for them. It's good for you. But I find in most cases, somebody that you as the superintendent or you as another district leader or school leader, somebody has the connection you need to unlock some funding.
Yeah. I mean, Jen, first off, can I get you back on here in the next couple of months? Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
We can go. I'll figure out some topic just to dive into. Is there anything that I didn't ask today that you'd hoped I asked, or something that's kind of on your heart or mind right now as you think about schools who are sitting there listening, or districts who are sitting here listening, thinking, what do I need next, or how can I be encouraged to go get funding?
The thing that's on my mind is I know that the public funding space, so state and federal grants, is really uncertain right now, right? There are a lot of changes happening, and sometimes they literally happen overnight. And it can feel really unsettling and unpredictable. And I just want to acknowledge that that is the reality right now. But there's still a lot of options outside of that realm. So while you continue to navigate that realm, I would encourage you to look into this private funding realm because it is a more stable funding stream. And it also leads to those more longstanding community partnerships or regional partnerships that are likely to increase in support and sustain a lot of your program and your funding for years to come. And now more than ever, we need some stability with education funding. And so I would just encourage you, if you haven't started thinking about that and leaning into that, I really feel like that is the missing piece right now while this public funding remains unsettled.
Well, I mean, Jen, I can attest. First off, your brilliance. Thank you. Again, I didn't do you justice as much as you tried to tell me. I hyped you up at the beginning of this. For those of you who work with us in FranklinCovey, I encourage everybody to start by talking to your client partner, and they will always be able to connect you to Jen and her team. I mean, it's crazy how quick Jen and her team hop on a call or have the resources sent. And so I just am so thankful for them. But ultimately, Jen, you've done the due diligence to create a resource that I think can help anybody, no matter where you're at with funding. And so I would encourage everybody to start there. If we can be of any other service, obviously we're easily searchable. And so you can reach out to us. We may even have our content, our connections in the notes of this. Jen, this was awesome. This is better than I can even think of. I know you're traveling now, so I appreciate you so much for figuring out how to make this work.
You bet.
I think the timing is perfect for everybody. So I appreciate you so much for making this work for us.
Thanks, Dustin. I look forward to being back to discuss more things about funding.
All right, can't wait. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Change Starts Here. A big thanks to my friend, Jennifer Chevalier, for sharing her wisdom and practical guidance on navigating the funding landscape, which so many of us are trying to figure out. If you'd like to go deeper, Jennifer has created a powerful resource to help you avoid the common missteps and to start positioning your school or district for success. It's in the notes. You can also join one of her upcoming funding webinars where she'll break down these ideas even further, and she'll even answer your questions in real time. As always, we'd love to hear from you. What questions do you have around funding? Drop them in the comments below, and we may even feature them in a future episode. If today's conversation was valuable, please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your colleagues. Your engagement helps us reach more leaders who are working to transform education. Until next time, remember, change doesn't start with new programs or resources. Change starts with you.
FranklinCovey Education is a trusted partner in developing leaders from the classroom to the boardroom in over 8,000 schools in over 70 countries.